Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be covering the 10th edition FAQ that GW just dropped today, and we're going to be looking at the specific things that affect the Craftworld Eldar from it. So, as some of you may be aware, there have been some rules that have been a little bit foggy since the beginning of 10th edition. Questions like, can I use a fate dice on a reroll? Or things like, can I deploy out of a transport that comes from reserve? Things like this. Things that are a little bit foggy, and technically you can do it, but there's not been clarification on it. And even if you look at the WTC rulings, it seems like they were a little bit behind the curve when it came to, updating their rule set and stuff like that. So a lot of competitive players and, some casual players even were confused about how certain rule interactions would work. So GW today made it official and clarified some of the more confusing parts of 10th edition for us. Some of the things directly affect the Craftworld Eldar in a pretty big way. So we're going to go over those today, and I have some good news for you guys and also some bad news. But, like always, we take things in stride, and mostly, though, it's going to be a buff for us in general. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right into today's video. But first, a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be going over the newly released WCW, that is the World Championships of Warhammer event FAQ. We're going to be looking at what in it directly affects the Eldar, and what this means going forward for the game, both competitively and casually. So what's in this document? What's in this FAQ? So first of all, it's just basically a one-page document clarifying various rule interactions in the competitive scene that players were running across. And this answers a lot of questions that the community had regarding multiple battle shock triggers, which now only trigger once. So if a unit technically can trigger a battle shock twice through multiple conditions, it's only going to trigger one battle shock test per time it's used, so it doesn't look like, a single unit can essentially trigger multiple battle shocks in a single phase anymore. Transports are clarified, rules regarding reserves are clarified, characteristic and damage modifiers are clarified, things like Melta, for example, and CP generation is clarified as well. Some of these things were kind of common sense, others weren't so common. So what in this directly affects the Eldar? So first of all, models disembarking from a transport or deep strike or reserves do not count as having moved for the triggering of abilities. However, I know what some of you guys are thinking, that's great for Overwatch, right? But Overwatch still can happen because it still counts as being set up. And Overwatch clearly states, unfortunately, that models setting up within its range also trigger or can trigger Overwatch in either the movement or charge phases. But outside of that, it doesn't trigger. So for example, things like Phantasm or Fire and Fade, stuff like that won't trigger in Overwatch. Strands of Fate can now be used for a reroll. GW clarified this in the most direct way possible. We will look at that in just a second. Infiltrate cannot be used when redeploying. So unfortunately, Prince Riel cannot, redeploy Rangers via Infiltrate. They would have to redeploy normally or be placed in strategic reserve. And lastly, models cannot disembark from a transport when arriving from reserve. So those of you who are using Falcons and Wave Serpents, putting them in reserve, coming in on the board with your, Fire Dragons out or Dire Avengers, unfortunately, that is no longer going to work. So first, let's take a look at models disembarking from a transport or deep strike and or reserves, not counting as having moved for the triggering of abilities, but still counting as being set up for Overwatch. So unfortunately, yes, just like that long-winded explanation sounded, this does not prevent Overwatch, and you can still target units that are set up on the battlefield this way. So if a unit comes out of a transport, it's technically being set up and can be Overwatched. The same thing goes for coming out of reserve or deep strike. However, this does prevent reactive moves like the Ranger's ability to move D6 when an enemy ends a move within 9. So if an enemy transport moves up outside of 9 inches and disembarks its cargo within 9 inches of a Ranger unit, that Ranger unit can no longer use its ability to move D6 inches away. You would have to move with Phantasm or another type of ability like that, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, this doesn't come up that much, but I've played a few games where something like this has indeed come up, and I have been able to move my Rangers out of the way. Most opponents will still be careful about that, but it is something that you now have to watch out for. Now, the next thing that is going to bum some of you out is that models cannot disembark from a transport when arriving from reserves. This was something that I had argued before because it was so unclear in the rulebook that yes, you could do it because technically it was still in your movement phase and, there was nothing preventing you from doing it, so why not? And in general, I think tournament organizers agreed. Most tournament organizers said, yeah, you could do it, kind of pretty straightforward. A lot of my buddies that are in my local gaming group who do go to tournaments and things said that that's how they were ruling it. So I just kind of assumed that was the case. Unfortunately not. GW has now, kind of put down the gavel on this one and said, nope, unfortunately, arriving from reserve means that units cannot disembark from a transport. So now, since we can't really do that anymore with Falcons and Wave Serpents, we now have to rely more on rapid ingress or start the battle on the board to be able to disembark immediately on any given turn. So here's the thing. Now, I think a lot of people are going to look at this and say, wow, this is a huge nerf because, the Falcon, it must be useless now, right? However, because of the way the rules worked with the units that were good in the Falcon, like fire dragons and stuff like that, I don't really think deep striking a Falcon was often a good choice. I think sometimes it was good, depending on, again, your opponent, the matchup, the board layout, etc., but was oftentimes not the best decision. And in any case, you can still use rapid ingress if you needed to get your Falcon in a certain place on the board and still be able to disembark and do all that kind of stuff. So although this is a nerf to the Falcon and to other transports in reserve, I don't think it's a big nerf, and I think the buffs that I'm going to talk about next are going to supersede this tenfold. And that, of course, is that Strands of Fate can now be used on a reroll. Yes, that's right, folks. If you don't like the result for your damage, you can spend a command point for a command reroll and just pop that baby to a 6 using your Fate dice. And you can also do this for basically any other roll that you want to that you would normally get a reroll on. So like hit rolls or wound rolls or anything like that. If you get a reroll on it, you can use a Strands dice on the reroll, which is extremely powerful because now you can fish for successful rolls before committing a Fate dice. And again, command rerolls allow you to reroll a lot of different stuff, and that can be really powerful when combined with Strands of Fate. And that's a pretty massive buff, as I'm sure some of you who have already been using it this way can attest to. Infiltrators cannot use their ability when redeployed, so Prince Riel's ability is a tad weaker than before. Again, this is not something that's game-breaking. It kind of sucks, but it probably sucks more for other armies than it does us. Not a lot of us are taking Prince Riel. I personally love Prince Riel. I think he's a cool model. I don't know if he's that great in the current state of the game. And again, that's just due to simply how redeployment works now. You don't know if you're going to be getting first or second turn before you actually redeploy, so its value is not as strong generally. So it's still good, especially if, you plan on doing other stuff with it. Like, if you plan on running Prince Riel with Corsairs, Corsairs have a scout move, so you can kind of do a little bit of trickery there if you need to and stuff like that. But in, most cases, it's just not going to be that useful. And plus, we really don't have any ability to redeploy anyway outside of Prince Riel in the first place. Okay, so what does it mean going forward for the Eldar and the game as a whole? So first of all, Strands of Fate is going to be much more powerful, and we can use our most important dice more sparingly. And this is great, again, like I said before, when used with a command reroll or unparalleled foresight. It's extremely powerful. It makes our shooting much more efficient and much more deadly. And since we have taken quite a few points nerfs, this is especially important. Rangers are going to be situationally more vulnerable as well. So, a lot of us do use Rangers here and again. It's not going to affect us too much, but there are going to be circumstances where, people are using transports a lot more in this edition. And you will see this come up to where, your Rangers might not be able to actually move, out of the way of a transport disembarking its troops. And in those cases, the Rangers will have to just basically either die or they're going to have to use Phantasm. Redeploying Infiltrators is still good, but not as powerful. So, that's not a great loss. If you're running Prince Riel, you're going to be a little bit bummed out by that if you were using it that way. But if not, things are going to continue as is, status quo. Nothing much has changed in that sense. Now, it is, however, going to be much harder to get value out of transports in reserves as their cargo cannot disembark the turn they arrive. You have to rely on rapid ingress or deploy them on the board normally. This is something that most of you have been doing, just like myself. I don't really like deep striking falcons or putting wave serpents in reserve this edition. Just because, opponents can screen out your units, and that means you have a little bit less maneuverability on the board when you come in. If your opponent's smart and has the units to do it, it's not always in the opponent's power to be able to screen everything, but it does give your opponents options in the first couple of turns of the game. So I usually like to, kind of just deploy them on the board. Sometimes, depending on my opponent, I might use rapid ingress if I think that, they don't have a way to stop it. So for some of you who have been running falcons and deep striking in falcons and stuff like that, this is going to sting a little bit. You're not going to be able to do the same thing, but you can always deploy them on the board normally, or you can use rapid ingress if needed. Okay, so in conclusion, I think obviously the biggest part of this update was the change of Strands of Fate, right? The fact that it is now confirmed that you can use Strands of Fate after a reroll is massive. It's absolutely fantastic for us and a huge boost to our already very efficient shooting. I suspect that the Eldar will become more powerful due to this universal change. Not being able to come out of a transport when coming out of reserves does suck a little bit, but it's not something I found myself doing often anyways as an Eldar player, even in a mech style list. Now, what I will say is this could indirectly be a buff to some of the things that are happening on, the other side of the board. So with other armies using transports a lot more, this is something that could help us out quite a bit. We don't typically like it when people come in behind us, people come in from reserves and stuff like that and start hitting our most vulnerable units. So this could be a bit of a blessing in disguise for a lot of Eldar builds that are worried about, opponents coming in behind you, disembarking, and just wrecking everything in your backline. And yeah, I think that just about covers it for the FAQ that was dropped today. Just wanted to kind of touch in with you guys and let you guys know about it. If I did miss anything that pertains to the Eldar, please let me know in the comment section. And I think that is going to wrap up the video today. So happy Halloween, everybody. Thanks for watching. And thank you to all my patrons and supporters who have supported me over the last months. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. If you do want to help support the channel and become a Patreon member, I have free trials activated. A free trial will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a cool community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who like talking about hobbying, tactics, and of course, Eldar strategy. I will leave the link for that in the description. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page if you want to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel to rep your local game store, or you want to grab some discounted Eldar miniatures through my affiliate link. I will leave both of those links in the description below. And lastly, I do have an Eldar Kickstarter going on for a Eldar Knights fan decks, which I hope to complete by the end of this month, well, basically end of November. If you do want to support that on Kickstarter, I will leave the link for that in the description as well. All right, everybody, that is going to be it today. Thanks for watching. We have some Dark Eldar content next time we're going to be on the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.